There were a lot of speculations about what the function of this object could have been. But before I can speak about the object, about its function, its purpose, what liquid may have been contained in this, I thought maybe I should actually talk about what is this face. Scholars conventionally refer to it as Bes, an Egyptian, let's say, genius, supernatural being, and that's another. Like, who exactly or what exactly is Bes? Because is he animal? Is he human? Is he a demon or a god? Is he even always male? Is there just one, or is there a plurality of beings by that name? What kind of general role do we think he had in Egypt? Because it's a being that emerged in Egypt and later spread throughout the entire Mediterranean world. But we are focusing today on Egypt. Then we can talk about scientific analysis that was performed on this mug. And these results are astounding, groundbreaking, and it's so exciting to be able to share that with you today. This is the first time that the museum is going public with this information. As the scientists who helped us perform these examinations say, science doesn't lie. What we would like to know, once we've found out what this concoction, what this liquid was, is that, okay, so what do we think where it was used and why it was used? Was it at home or in a temple? Was it some kind of magic ritual performed in private? Or is it part of perhaps a larger religious ceremony? As you can see, a lot of questions, and in general, when scientists or scholars have questions, they look for answers, but they come up with more questions. So here you see a nice relief of Bes, a snake coiling around his arm. He's yielding a dagger or a short sword, and there is a smaller figure, female, standing next to him. And we generally call that female version Besa or Beset. That's the female version, but I warn you that there are very few actual textual references that call her by that name. It's another convention among scholars because otherwise we don't really know what to talk about. But it already poses the question, is Bes always male, or is there also a female version? And is that then a name or a title? If there can be one, can there also be many? There are examples where you see 4, 5, 6 similar figures in a row. Here you see that he has rather stunted appearance, but the female figure next to him is not. We will see that there are depictions that we conventionally call Bes, where Bes has just a regular idealized body. Can we call this a human figure? Some of the features seem more animalistic. And if an animal, is it a lion or a cat? Can we call it a deity, or is it actually a demon? Very frightful in appearance. When we look more at his functions, maybe we can consider him not so evil, but more protective. If it's a deity, are there any temples dedicated to him? Priesthoods, altars? Or is it only a deity that was worshipped in a domestic context? Some of this we'll try to answer today. Here are a few depictions from different periods. You already see that there are figurines that have this sort of lion-like face. It can be a male figure, can be a female figure, it can be in a regular idealized corporeal representation. Or you see this stunted figure, and we have male, we have female, we have individual representations, we have representations in a group, we have stunted and idealized figurations, and then stunted, but there's also a text where Bes is called the dwarf that reaches the sky. So he's a dwarf who is also a giant. So you start to see this picture that it's very hard to pinpoint what exactly Bes is. And maybe Bes is just that, Bes. Here are a few other configurations where we cannot always be sure if in ancient Egypt these configurations would be recognized as the same being. All the way on your left you see a figure that is also clutching snakes in the hand, also has this kind of feline or leonine ears and manes, also a stunted figure. But in some scholarly publications and museum displays, this figure is not called Bes, but Aha, which means the fighter. Is the fighter a title, a role that Bes plays, or is Aha an entirely separate being who just looks the same? Are these little amulets that you see in the middle the same figure, or is it maybe an antecedent or a related figure that also sort of looks like a lion man or a feline? When we think of Bes, we see the first similar kind of configurations on these beautiful tusks. They're from hippopotami, and you see a whole constellation of beings that look like demons and have often been interpreted as demonic forces. But then this object, when it is inscribed with text that explains its function, the object itself is actually apotropaic. That means it wards off dangers. It is protective. And so how can demonic figures be protective? Well, in part, the word demonic is a Christian term that derives from Greek, where that word just meant a supernatural genius, a being that is not divine like the gods on Olympus, but is also not like human beings here on earth. Frightful figures in ancient Egypt are maybe frightful to us, but they are also frightful to evil. So in their hideous appearances, they scare away the evil forces. The figure in the middle with the wings has a perfect body that you would associate with the god. The head is very similar to the head of Bes, but there are scholars who say this is not Bes, this is a separate being. It is a what is often called pancratic deity, a god who empowers everything, or a pantheistic god, a god who embodies all other gods, maybe a step towards monotheism. Or no, this is a specific manifestation of a specific god. That god may be perhaps Amun. And you see another configuration where suddenly Bes has a Roman shield. And so in the Roman period he is still worshipped very much, and he's given attributes from a Roman background. All the way in the New Kingdom, in a tomb of a princess called Sitamun, who was the aunt of Tutankhamun, to give you an idea. So we're talking about the 14th century before the Common Era. There's this beautiful throne found in her tomb. You see three Bes figures here, and I think this is the back panel where you see two Bes figures with a hippopotamus goddess who is part hippopotamus, part crocodile, part lion. So also very frightful in appearance, but is associated with childbirth, protective goddess. Bes is wielding knives in one depiction, in the other depiction he is holding a tambourine. So there are different variations, but note that there are no texts that clearly identify. We call it Bes because we recognize the iconography, but we've already seen that an object that or a configuration that looks very similar has also been called Aha. Beating a tambourine, there are examples you'll see later where he's playing the harp or the lute, are entirely different from clutching snakes and yielding knives. So for instance here you see Bes play a lute, you see Bes play a harp, and the inscription next to it doesn't call it Bes, but Hitti. So now what? And is Hitti, that word, that name, is that related to Aha? Is that like over the generations and generations has that name devolved from Aha into Hitti? Or is Hitti a configuration of Bes? These are good questions, and we get further and further drawn into the morass of these questions. You also see a beautiful blue-shaped cosmetic object. where we are thinking, why would this rather charming but hideous figure be associated with cosmetics? Well, if you apply eyeliner in antiquity and you prick your cornea, that is dangerous, that is frightful, and you want to be beautiful and you don't want to hurt yourself. So scaring away the evil forces may prevent that from happening. So we have various iconographies, various configurations, and uncertainty about the exact status of what or who Bess is. Some of it we have some grasp of, and when we look in what contexts we find this figure to try and understand what his role was, we come across this, what I've already mentioned, the apotropaic function, the warding off of evil, the protecting against dangers and risks. So wielding a knife can be the same as beating a drum, because by beating the drum you also chase the evil spirits away. By playing a harp, you pacify the evil forces. So these various attributes that he yields might actually symbolize the same thing, where he is scaring away the evil forces. One of the roles that scholars identify Bess performed was to protect the solar cycle, specifically during the day, from dawn to dusk. So far as I can attest, he is never connected with the journey of the sun at night, when the sun is in the underworld. He is also a protector of the great goddess. This is a story that we can give an entire lecture about. The great goddess was tired of mankind and just wanted to devour all men on earth. She went afar, and the god Amun wanted her to return. So she was pacified through music, through dance, lots of drinking, and she returned into Egypt happy and merry in the accompaniment of Bess and other gods, as well as dancing baboons. Here there is an idea that he is protective, but he's also merriment, a being associated with drinking. We have a mug. Maybe that drinking is associated with that festival of drunkenness. In fact, the great goddess is also known as the Lady of Drunkenness, and Bess is known as the Lord of Drunkenness. So could this mug be associated with that wine or beer, and associated with that kind of merriment? We've seen objects that are associated with the life of women, particularly pregnant women. Pregnancy and childbirth were very dangerous in the life of a woman. The risks of dying after giving labor were very high. Infant mortality was also very high. Probably 2 out of 3 children will not reach adulthood. So then there are the insecurities about and the anxieties about simple conception. Infertility was a problem. Pregnancy is a dangerous period in a woman's life. Labor and infancy, these are areas where Bess is very often found. He also protects people in their sleep and in their dreams, gives them dream visions, we are told. He gives oracles, and he protects against illness and poisons. In the wildlife of Egypt, there are many scorpions and snakes and other animals that can poison you. There are plants that might be poisonous, and Bess is one of the protectors against that. So maybe that is what the mug was used for, to cure illnesses or to take a cure after you've been poisoned. One of my partners in crime, Dr. Davide Tanassi, who unfortunately couldn't make it today, came to me and said, I do residue sampling of ancient objects. If I were to come to the museum, what object would you like to have sampled? And I explained that scholars have been speculating what these mugs were used for. Sacred water, milk, wine, beer, maybe an ointment or a perfumed oil for cosmetic purposes, even lubricants, maybe even medicinal liquids. So this is the one object that we have so many questions about, and we're not even close to knowing what it could have been used for. But to backtrack a little bit, this is an object made from a mold, and we can not only see that from how it is made, but we can also know this because there are many objects, I say many, I'm talking about a dozen, that are identical, that come from the same mold or from very similar molds. The handle is handmade, the neck as well, and you can see the frightful grimace of Bess here very well. The object was donated to the museum in 1984 by a man whose name is David S. Hendrick III. By now, unfortunately, he passed away. I don't think that this object had ever been on display in the museum until now, so people didn't know what to do with it, how to explain it. I think that is one of the reasons why it may not have been on display before. He donated 50 antiquities in 1984. That quadrupled the Antiquities collection at the time. This is 2 years before the museum acquired the Joseph H. Noble collection. And Mr. Hendrick also donated 100 engravings of Winslow Homer to the Museum of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg. So he was certainly a patron of the arts. We know that he was a World War II veteran and that he came to Florida for establishing the Florida Citrus Mutual Company. He made his fortune in oranges. This is the list of people who worked with us to examine this object. A total of 16 or 15 different individuals and 11 different institutions. Most of our colleagues who work in the laboratories are in Italy. Davide is the principal lead here, as well as Enrico Greco. We had other examinations performed by another USF professor, Robert Tykot, who was able to join us to examine the clay and possible traces of pigment. What these scientists did was cutting-edge scientific research. And when I say cutting edge, I mean 15 years ago this kind of analysis would not have been possible. They examined the organic residue. That means Davide Tenassi scraped a little bit of the inside, like just to 1 gram, and that was enough to perform these kind of scientific analyses. Proteomic, metabolomic, and even eventually genetic DNA analysis, as well as synchrotron infrared spectroscopy. And as you can imagine, my difficulty saying these words, I have no idea what that is. What it does is help us identify components that were used in the beverage or potion inside this mug. We found ingredients that were nutritional, medicinal, pharmacological, and biological. And these are scientists, so they take into account that there are trace elements that can always be found. So you have to take a certain percentage, and below of that, these trace elements become insignificant. The substances that we will be talking about are ingredients, are substances that indicate that that is what the object was used for. These are not trace elements like maybe, a human hair just ended up in there by accident, or some fungus that grew inside the mug over the centuries. There is a beverage. The first result Davide came with was we found yeast and we found wheat. So I was celebrating because we found beer. But he also found a fruit that is probably grape, but can also be pomegranate. And if that becomes an alcoholic concoction, you have wine. So is it beer and wine? After that, he found evidence of either honey or royal jelly. And then it just went crazier and crazier from there. Sesame seed, a derivative of pine, maybe the nut or oil of pine, and licorice even. I didn't even know, but even in the tomb of Tutankhamun, licorice was found. It was known to the Greeks, it was very apparently popular, and it was called the black treasure of the king. But the cocktail turned out to be spiked, and this is where it gets really incredible. The pharmacological medicinal compounds that were found include Syrian rue, also known scientifically as Peganum harmale, which is hallucinogenic. And what I also didn't know is that the ancient, or one of the ancient names for Paganum is Bessa or Bessessa in several different languages. And it has survived in modern Syrian. That word still refers to harmala, the plant Syrian rue. This could mean that this plant, or the produce of it, was intimately connected with Bess, because at least from an etymological point of view, it seems that the plant has the name of Bess. Also, blue water lily was found. That's often called Egyptian lotus, but lotus and water lily are two entirely different species. Also something I didn't really realize. And that has a psychoactive and intoxicating effect. This we knew already from reading Homer and Herodotus, 8th century and 5th century authors who talk about the Egyptians and the people in the in the Indus Valley as being lotus eaters. The Greeks also didn't know the difference between lotus and water lily. And then a plant called spider plant or bee plant, scientific name Cleome, where the scientific research couldn't specify this exact species. There are only two that could apply, and that may have labor-inducing qualities. It wasn't the end. At the last samples, they found human fluids. So the cocktail that was spiked turned into a magic potion. Human blood, mother milk, which is unique, it is identifiable as mother milk, not cow milk or another kind of milk, and mucus. Mucus is in the entire tract from the mouth down to the intestines. So you cannot say if that mucus was spit, saliva, or snot from the nose, or in the case of a woman, a vaginal secretion. And that raises the question if the blood was menstrual blood. The sample is not good enough and the genetic material is not detailed enough to identify if the blood and the milk are from the same person. You cannot determine where mucus is from, because mucus is mucus, wherever in the body it comes from, and the same with blood. But it would have clearly been an object used with some kind of magic ritual when you have all these components together. And maybe now you understand why there were so many flavors added to it, because probably some of these ingredients didn't taste very well. I mean, this is astounding. As I said earlier, there were all sorts of speculations of what this kind of mugs were used for, and also, of course, what kind of drinks were found in it. Almost all the kinds of speculations that existed were, with this result at least, proven wrong. Unfortunately, none of the closest mugs that we know have been excavated in scientific controlled excavations. That means we don't know if they come from homes or shrines or temples or maybe even a tomb, a grave, and that makes it difficult to know for sure in what context these objects could have been used. So possible functions are maybe daily use. I wouldn't recommend drinking this on a daily basis, but who knows? Or a festive that seems more likely. The inebriation, the Lord and Lady of Drunkenness, that might be a better fit. Just like drinking beer or wine, but then, with an added bonus. But it's particularly the human fluids that make it less likely that this was regularly used. It seems to be much more specific, particularly, human blood, mother milk, mucus, that connects the object to one individual. And that makes it seem more likely that this was used in some kind of magic ritual. And we still don't know if that magic ritual took place in a domestic setting or in a specific setting where a priest could oversee it, or in a wider religious ceremony. One of the speculations that have been suggested before this was tested was that these mugs were somehow used in the context of what is called Bess chambers. There are 4 or 5 of these Bess chambers that were excavated more than 100 years ago in Sakara. Sakara is part of the large pyramid fields to the west of Cairo, all the way from Giza and Abu Sir, then Sakara and Dashur to the south. These are basically cemeteries, but there are also temple complexes, shrines, and these mysterious Bess chambers. They are clearly dedicated to Bess because all the walls are decorated with what were once brightly painted reliefs where you see Bess, often accompanied by his female companion. Within that context of Sakara, there are other temples where we know some rituals happen that are called incubation rituals. A few more images. One is a watercolor that the excavator had published to give an impression of the colors they saw when they excavated these chambers. These are the objects that were found there. You see priests, often accompanied by Bess, carrying large phalluses, and then there's a figure sitting on top. It's not directly his phallus, he also has his own, but this seems to be quite clearly associated with male virility. These were the kinds of objects that were dedicated in these spaces. I don't know how many. The excavator just says that there were a lot of them. He does describe other objects that were found there, some pottery as well, but not the kind of mugs that we're talking about today. It was within this context that these Bess chambers were already associated with fertility and virility and probably with childbirth. In other shrines dedicated to Osirapis, a Memphite god, and another temple dedicated to Imhotep, that is originally the mythological architect of the first pyramid, who became a heroic deity in his own right, also associated with health and curing, and the Greeks identified him with Asclepius. We know that for these gods there were incubation rituals where a worshipper would sleep in the temple and wait for a dream vision to answer a question, a pertinent personal question, which often deals with the anxieties associated with human life. If we are thinking about these things together, I think you start to see a picture. Fertility, dream visions, chambers dedicated to Bess. Men went there and dedicated statues for their own virility in order to procreate, establish a family, pray for the good health of the mother and the child. Then it wouldn't be a far stretch that women also visited these chambers with their own prayers for their own fertility, for a successful conception and pregnancy, and particularly to be protected during the dangers of childbearing, and after the infant is born, that infant too will be healthy. These are, like I said, anxieties that women went through, and we don't have written proof that these rituals happened for Bess, but if we connect that with the object that we have found, you can understand now what induced these visions. It's not that you sit in a temple and you get divinely inspired. The concoction, the magic potion, helps you to get that um, that divine inspiration. Also, you need a priest to be there to combine the ingredients and combine it in such a way that it inspires an hallucination. In other proportions, it might have other effects. And you add a little bit of human milk, human blood, to make it a really ritualistic object. We've seen that Bess is a guardian genius who is part human, part animal, who is a supernatural, let's say, guardian being. We've heard about a magic potion that contains mostly plant-based ingredients, some of which have medicinal and psychotropic properties, and also these human fluids that make it a ritual, magical potion. It's only the beginning that we're doing this research, but I feel that it is not much of a stretch to say these mugs were used in these incubation rituals, the sleeping in a temple or in a sacred space, to invoke the god, or in this case Bess, to give a vision in a dream, to maybe soothe them or give them help in their anxieties in these Bess chambers in Sakara. You see here 3D printed examples of the mug that were scanned by Davide Tenassi about 2.5–3 years ago. He has uploaded that 3D model onto Sketchfab while he was there. Scholars at work. Rob Tykot was there also, USF professor in anthropology, with his own little pistol, a portable X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, to analyze the minerals of the clay and to see if there might be any kind of pigment traces. And other than the calcium that is probably in the lime wash of the object, we were not really able to determine anything. The only thing that was possible to determine is it's clay, no surprise, but not clay that is modern. Davide is standing here with his Artex Spider 3D scanner with which he scans the object. So it's completely without even touching the object that he can do that. And let me plug my other partner in crime. Dr. Robert Stephen Bianchi and I are co-editors of a volume that will come out early this year. It's already 2024. Hopefully in spring, otherwise early in summer, where we've brought together several essays on this fascinating being, about these tusks, the first person to study this aha, the fighter, within that context of the tusks. We have an article about, is the Bess head a mask? Are there masks? And is there a masking ceremony in ancient Egypt? What are the arguments for and against? We have articles about about the various Bess amulets and about Bess gemstones. The article about the Tampa Bes Mug, and an article about another Bess vessel that may have been used for the same, but maybe for an entirely different purpose. And also an article that traces Bess outside of Egypt, in the wider Mediterranean world, where he was very well known. The island of Ibiza actually is the place of Bess. And so he was worshipped throughout, eventually, the Mediterranean world. If you haven't seen it, and I wouldn't blame you because it's only recently been installed, but it is currently on view in our Prelude exhibition, together with some other animals, a nice lion and a barking dog and a beautiful horse figurine. So if you have a chance, go upstairs and enjoy it. There's another Bess statuette all the way in the Identity exhibition on the other side of the museum. That probably also had never been on display before. Bess is one of my favorite figures. I've been examining him since I think 2015 with my partner in crime, Robert Bianchi. I'm very grateful that he and I are now co-editors on a volume to close off almost 10 years of work on this fascinating figure. I could never have predicted that this would happen. People ask, like, well, did you know that you were going to find something like that? It's like, this has never been done before. And we are hoping that by bringing this out to the world, by making this research public, that other scholars will look into their collections, look into museum collections, and do similar kind of research. It is now possible to do it. It is now possible to do it in a way that is also uncontroversial. It's scientifically solid, and it's just very fascinating that we can be part of this kind of research where we're only just starting to learn something that after 150 years of Egyptology, we're still finding new things, still new discoveries, and trying to look for an answer, we actually came up with more questions. But thank you for your attention. If there are questions, there's always time for that, but also make sure you go upstairs before we close at 8. Thank you.